The Shadow over Innsmouth, Part 3 by H.P. Lovecraft. It must have been some imp of the perverse, or some sardonic pull from dark hidden sources, which made me change my plans as I did. I had long before resolved to limit my observations to architecture alone, and I was even then hurrying toward the square in an effort to get quick transportation out of this festering city of death and decay. But the sight of old Zadok Allen set up new currents in my mind and made me slacken my pace uncertainly. I had been assured that the old man could do nothing but hint at wild, disjointed, and incredible legends, and I had been warned that the natives made it unsafe to be seen talking to him. Yet the thoughts of this aged witness to the town's decay, with memories going back to the early days of ships and factories, was a lure that no amount of reason could make me resist. After all, the strangest and maddest of myths are often merely symbols or allegories based upon truth, and old Zadok must have seen everything which went on around Innsmouth for the last 90 years. Curiosity flared up beyond sense and caution, and in my youthful egotism I fancied I might be able to sift a nucleus of real history from the confused, extravagant outpouring I could probably extract with the aid of raw whiskey. I knew that I could not accost him then and there, for the firemen would surely notice and object. Instead, I reflected, I would prepare by getting some bootleg liquor at a place where the grocery boy had told me was plentiful. Then I would loaf near the fire station in apparent casualness, and fall in with old Zadok after he had started on one of his frequent rambles. The youth said that he was very restless, seldom sitting around in the station for more than an hour or two at a time. A quart bottle of whiskey was easily, though not cheaply, obtained in the rear of a dingy variety store just off the square in Elliot Street. The dirty-looking fellow who had waited on me had a touch of the staring Innsmouth look, but was quite civil in his way, being perhaps used to the custom of such convivial strangers, truckmen, gold buyers, and the like, as were occasionally in town. Re-entering the square, I saw that luck was with me, for, shuffling out of Payne Street round the corner of the Gilman house, I glimpsed nothing less than the tall, lean, tattered form of old Zadok Allen himself. In accordance with my plan, I attracted his attention by brandishing my newly purchased bottle, and soon realized that he had begun to shuffle wistfully after me as I turned into Waite Street on my course to the most deserted region I could think of. I was steering my course by the map the grocery boy had prepared, and was aiming for the wholly abandoned stretch of southern waterfront which I had previously visited. The only people in sight there had been the fishermen on the old distant breakwater, and by going a few squares south I could get beyond range of these, finding a pair of seats on some abandoned wharf, and being free to question old Zadok unobserved for an indefinite time. Before I reached Main Street, I could hear a faint and wheezy, "Hey, mister!" behind me, and I presently allowed the old man to catch up and take copious pulls from the quart bottle. I began putting out feelers as we walked along the water street, and turned southward amidst the omnipresent desolation and crazily tilted ruins, but found that the aged tongue did not loosen as quickly as I had expected. At length, I saw a grass-grown opening towards the sea between crumbling brick walls, with the weedy length of an earth and masonry wharf projecting beyond. Piles of moss-covered stones near the water promised tolerable seats, and the scene was sheltered from all possible view by a ruined warehouse on the north. Here, I thought, was the ideal place to sit for a long secret colloquy. So I guided my companion down the lane and picked out spots to sit in amongst the mossy stones. The air of death and desertion was ghoulish, and the smell of fish almost insufferable, but I was resolved to let nothing deter me. About 4 hours remained for conversation if I were to catch the 8 o'clock coach for Arkham, and I began to dole out more liquor to the ancient tippler, meanwhile eating my own frugal lunch. In my donations I was careful not to overshoot the mark, for I did not wish Zadok's vinous garrulousness, good God, this man likes big words, to pass into a stupor. After an hour, his furtive taciturnity showed signs of disappearing, but much to my disappointment, he still sidetracked my questions about Innsmouth and his shadow-haunted past. He would babble of current topics, revealing a wide acquaintance with newspapers, and a great tendency to philosophize in a sententious village fashion. Toward the end of the second hour, I feared my quart of whiskey would not be enough to produce results, and was wondering whether I had better leave Old Sadok and go back for more. Just then, however, chance made the opening which my questions had been unable to make, and a wheezing ancient's rambling took a turn that caused me to lean forward and listen alertly. My back was toward the fishy-smelling sea, but he was facing it, and something other had caused his wandering gaze to light on the low, distant line of Devil Reef, then showing plainly and almost fascinatingly above the waves. The sight seemed to displease him, for he began a series of weak curses which ended in a confidential whisper and a knowing leer. He bent towards me, took hold of my coat lapel, and hissed out some hints that could not be mistaken. "There's where it all began. That cursed place of all wickedness, where the deep water starts. Gate o' hell. So you drop down to a bottom no sounding line can take. Old Captain Obed done it, him that found out more'n was good for him in the South Sea Islands. Everybody was in a bad way them days. Trade falling off, mills losing business, even the new ones, and the best of our menfolks killed a privateer in the War of 1812, or lost with the Elysian brig and the Ranger Snow, both of them Gilman ventures. Obed Marsh, he had 3 ships afloat, Brigantine Columbia, Brig Hetty, and bark Sumatra Queen. He was the only one that kept on with the East Indian Pacific trade, though Esdras Martin's barkentine Malay Pride made a venture as late as 28. Never was nobody like Captain Obed. Hold him a Satan! I can mind him a-telling about foreign parts, and calling the folks stupid for going to Christian meeting and bearing their burdens meek and lowly. Says they oughter get better gods like some of the folks in the Indies, gods that'd bring them good fishing in return for their sacrifices, and that'd really answer folks' prayers. Matt Elliot, his first mate, talked a lot too, only he was again folks doing any heathen things. Showed about an island east of Otaheite, where there was a lot of them stone ruins other than anybody knew anything about, kind of like those in Panope and the Carolines, but with carvings of faces that looked like the big statues on Easter Island. There was a little volcanic island near there too, where there was other ruins with different carvings. Ruins all wore away like they'd been under the sea onked, and with pictures of awful monsters all over 'em. Well, sir, Matty says the natives around there had all the fish they could catch, and sported bracelets and armlets and headreds made out of queer kind of gold and covered with pictures of monsters, just like the ones carved over the ruins on a little island. Sorter fish-like frogs or frog-like fishes, and was drawn in all kinds of positions like they was a human beings. And nobody could make out either where they got all the stuff, and all the other natives wondered how they managed to find fish in plenty, even on the Victionary next islands had lean pickings. Matt, he got to wondering too, and so did Captain Obed. Obed, he notices, besides, and lots of the handsome young folks that drop out of sight for good for year to year, and they wasn't many old folks around. Also, he thinks some of the folks looks darned queer, even for Kanaki's. It took Obed to get the truth out of them heathen. I don't know how he done it, but he begun by trading for the gold things they were, asked them where they come from, and if they could get more, and finally wormed the story out of the old chief, Wallachia they called him. Nobody but Obed had ever believed the old yeller devil, but Captain could read folks like they was books. Nobody but ever believes me now when I tell them, and I don't suppose you will, young feller, though come to look at you, you've kind of got them sharp reading eyes like Obed had. The old man's whisper grew even fainter, and I found myself shuddering at the terrible and sincere portentousness of his intonation, even though I knew his tale could be nothing but drunken fantasy. Well, sir, Obed, he learned that these things on his earth, as most folks ain't never heard about, and I wouldn't believe if they did hear. It seems these Kanakis was sacrificing heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea, and getting all kinds of favour in return. They met the things on a little islet with the clear ruins, and it seems them awful pictures of frogfish monsters were supposed to be pictures of the things. Maybe there's kind of critters that's got all the mermaid stories insect-hearted. They had all kinds of cities on the sea bottom, and this island was heaved up from there. Seems I was some of the things alive in the stone buildings when the island come up sudden to the surface. That's how the Kanakis got wind they was down there. Made sign talk as soon as they got over being scared, and pieced up a bargain before long. Them things liked human sacrifices. Had 'em ages before, but lost track of the upper world after a time. What they done to the victims, it ain't for me to say, and I guess Obed wasn't none too sharp about asking. But it was all right with the heathens, because they'd been having a hard time and was desperate about everything. They gave a certain number of young folks to see things twixt every year, May Eve and Halloween, regular as could be. Also give some of the carved knickknacks they made. But the things agreed to give in return was plenty of fish. They drove 'em in from all over the sea, and a few gold-like things now and then. Well, as I says, the natives spent the things in a little volcanic island, going there in canoes with the sacrifices and etc., and bringing back any of the gold-like jewels as was coming to 'em. At first, the things never did go into the main island, but after a time, they come to want to. Seems they hankered arter mixing with the folks, and having giant ceremonies on the big days, May Eve and Halloween. You see, they was able to live both in and out of water, what they call amphibians. I guess. Kanakis told 'em as how folks from the other islands might want to wipe 'em out if they got wind of their being there, but they says they don't care much, because they could wipe out the whole brood of humans if they was willing to bother, that is. Any as if didn't have certain signs such as was used unks by the old ones, the lost old ones, whoever they was. But not one to bother, they'd lay low when anybody visited the island. When it come to mating with them toad-looking fishes, the Kanakis kinda balked, but finally they learnt something that's put a new face on the matter. Seems that human folks has got a kind of relation to sich water beasts, that everything alive come out of the water unct, and only needs a little change to go back again. Them things told the Kanakis that if they mixed bloods there'd be children as look human at first, but later turn more and more like the things. Till finally they'd take to the water and join the main lot of things down there. And this is the important part, young fellow. They must turn to the fish things who went into the water wouldn't ever die. Them things never died except they was killed violent. Well, sir, it seems by the time Obed knew them islanders, they was all full of fish blood from the deep water things. When they got old and begun to show it, they was kept hid until they felt like taking to the water and quitting the place. Some was more attached than others, and some never did change quite enough to take to the water. But mostly, they turned out just the way them things said. Them as was born more like the things changed darly, but as them was nearly human sometimes stayed on the island till they was past 70, though they'd usually go down for trial trips afore that. Folks as it took to the water generally come back a good deal to visit. So's a man enough to be talking to his own 5 times straight grandfather, who'd left the dry land a couple of 100 years or so afore. Everybody got out the idea of dying, except a canoe war to the other islanders, or our sacrifices to sea gods down below, or from snake blight, or plague, or sharp galloping ailments, or something before they could take to the water. But simply look for it a kind of change that went a bit horrible after a while. They thought what they got was well worth what all they had to give up, and I guess Obed kinda come to think the same himself when he chewed over old Wallachaia's story a bit. Wallachia, though, was one of a few that ain't got the fish blood, being of a royal line that intermarried with royal lines on other islands. Wallachia, he showed Obed a lot of rites and incantations as had to do with the fish things, and let him see some of the folks in the village as had changed a lot from human shape. Somehow or other, though, he never would let him see one of the regular things to ride out of the water. In the end, he gave him a fine kind of thingamajig made out of lead or something, that he said would bring up the fish things from any place in the water where they might be a nest of them. The idea was to drop it down with the right kind of praise and such. Wallachia allowed as the things were scattered all over the world, so anybody that looked about could find a nest and bring 'em up if they was wanted. Matt, he didn't like this business at all, and wanted Obed should keep away from the island, but the captain was sharp for gain and found he could get them gold-like things so cheap it'd pay to make a specialty of them. Things went on that way for years, and Obed got enough of the gold-like stuff to make him start a refinery in Waite's old run-down filling mill. He didn't dare sell the piece like they was, for folks would be all the time asking questions. All the same, his crews would get a piece and dispose of it now and then, even though they was sworn to keep quiet. And he let his women folks wear some of the pieces as were more human-like than most. Well, come about 38, and I was 7-year-old, Obed, he found the island people all wiped out between voyages. Seems the other islanders had got wind of what was going on, and had took matters in their own hands. Suppose they must had. Arter all, them old magic signs and the sea things, these was the only things they was afeard of. No telling what any of them Kanakis will chance to get a hold of when the sea bottom throws up some island with ruins older than the deluge. Pious cusses these was. They didn't leave nothing standing on either the main island or the little volcanic islet, except parts of the ruins was too big to knock down. In some places, there was little stones strewed about, like charms or something like what you call a swastika nowadays. Probably them was the old ones' signs. Folks all wiped out, no trace of no gold-like things, and none of the nearby Kanakis had breathed a word about the matter. Wouldn't even admit they'd ever been people on that island. That naturally hit Obed pretty hard, seeing as his normal trade was doing very poor. It hit the whole of Innsmouth too, because in seafaring days, our property master of the ship generally profited the crew proportionate. Most of the folks around the town took the hard times kinda sheep-like and resigned, but they was in bad shape because the fishing was petering out, and the mills weren't doing none too well. Then's the time nobody begun a cursing at the folks for being dull sheep and praying to a Christian heaven as didn't help 'em none. He told 'em he knowed if folks is prayed to gods that give you something they really need, and says if a good bunch of men would stand by him, he could maybe get a hold of certain pyres as would bring plenty of fish and quite a bit of gold. Of course, them as served on the Sumatri Queen at Sealy Island knowed what he meant, and wasn't none too anxious to get close to see things like they'd heard tell on. But them as didn't know what was all about got kind of swayed by what Obed had to say, and begun to ask him what he could do to set him on the way to the faith as would bring him results. Here the old man faltered, stumbled, and lapsed into a moody and apprehensive silence, glancing nervously over his shoulder, and then turning back to stare fascinatedly at the distant black reef. When I spoke to him, he did not answer, so I knew I would have to let him finish the bottle. The insane yarn I was hearing interested me profoundly, for I fancied there was contained within it a sort of crude allegory based upon the strangenesses of Innsmouth, and elaborated by imagination at once creative and full of scraps of exotic legend. Not for a moment did I believe that the tale had any really substantial foundation, but nonetheless the account held a hint of genuine terror, if only because it brought in references to strange jewels, clearly akin to the malign tiara I had seen at Newburyport. Perhaps the ornaments had, after all, come from some strange island, and possibly the wild stories were lies of the bygone Obed himself rather than this antique toper. I handed Zadok the bottle, and he drained it to the last drop. It was curious how he could stand so much whiskey, for not even a trace of thickness had come into his high, wheezy voice. He licked the nose of the bottle and slipped it into his pocket, then beginning to nod and whisper softly to himself. I bent close to catch any articulate words he might mutter, and I thought I saw a sardonic smile behind the stained, bushy whiskers. Yes, he was really forming words, and I could grasp a fair portion of them. Poor Matt. Matt, he was almost again it. Tried to line up the folks on his side and had the long talks to the preachers. No use. They run the congregational parson out of town, and the Methodist feller quit. Never did see Resolved Babcock, the Baptist parson, again. Wrath of Jehovah. I was a mighty little critter, but I heard what I heard and seen what I seen. Dagon and Ashtoreth, Belial and Beelzebub, golden calf on the idols of Canaan and the Philistines, Babylonish abominations, many, tickle a parson. He stopped again, and from the look in his watery blue eyes, I feared he was close to a stupor, after all. But when I gently shook his shoulder, he turned on me with astonishing alertness, and snapped out some more obscure phrases. Don't believe me, eh? Then just tell me, young feller, why Captain Obed and 20-odd other folks used to row out to Devil Reef in the dead of night and chant things so loud you could hear 'em all over town when the wind was right. Tell me that, hey? And tell me why Captain Obed was always dropping heavy things down to the deep water to the other side of the reef, where the bottom slips down like the cliff lower than you can stand. Tell me what he had done with that funny-shaped lead thingamajig as Wallachia gave him. Hey, boy! And what did they used to all howl on May Eve, and again the next Halloween? And why the new church parsons, fellers that used to be sailors, wear them queer robes and cover themselves with them gold-like things Obed brung, hey? The watery blue eyes were almost savage and maniacal now, and the dirty white beard bristled electrically. Old Zadok probably saw me shrink back, for he had begun to cackle evilly. Beginning to see, eh? Maybe I'd like to have been me in them days, and I see things at night out to sea from the cupola at top of my house. Oh, I can tell ye, little pictures of big ears, and I wasn't missing nothing I was gossip about Pot Captain Obed and the folks out to the reef. How about the night I took my pa's ship glass up to the cupola, and seed the reef a bristling black, thick with shapes that dove off quick soon's the moon riz. Obed and the folks was in a dory, but them shapes stove off the far side in the deep water and never come up. How'd you like to be, little shaver, all up in a cupola, watching shapes as one human shapes, hey? The old man was getting hysterical, and I began to shiver with a nameless alarm. He laid a gnarled claw on my shoulder, and it seemed to me that its shaking was not altogether that of mirth. Suppose one night you seed something heavy heaved off an Obed's dory beyond the reef, and then larned next day a young feller was missing from home, hey? Did anyone ever see hide or hair of Hiram Gilman again, did they? And Nick Pierce, and Louis Waite, and Aldiranam Southwick, and Henry Garrison, hey? Shapes talking sign language with their hands. They must have real hands. Well, sir, that was the time Obed began to get on his feet again. Folks seed his 3 darters a wearing gold-like things as nobody ever seen on him before, and smoke curd coming out of the refinery chimney. Other folks were prospering too. Fish began to swarm out into the harbour fit to kill, and heaven knows what sized cargoes we began to ship out to Newburyport, Arkham and Boston. 'Twas then Obed got the Old Branch Railroad put through. Some Kingsport fishermen heard about the catch and come up in sloops, but they was all lost. Nobody ever seen him again. And just then, our folks organised the esoteric order of Dagon and brought Masonic Olaf and cavalry commandery for it. Matt Elliott was a mason again and again to selling, but he dropped out of sight just then. Remember, I ain't saying Obed was set on heaven things just like they was on a Kanaki Isle. I don't think he aimed at fuss to do no mixing, nor raise no young'uns to take to the water and turn into fishes of eternal life. He wanted them gold things, and was willing to pay heavy, and I guess the others was satisfied for a while. Come in 46, the town done some looking and thinking for itself. Too many folks missing, too much wild preaching and meeting of a Sunday, too much talk about that reef. I guess I done a bit by telling Selectman Mowry what I heard from the cupola. He was a party one night as followed Obed's crowd out to the reef, and I heard shots betwixt the dories. Next day, Obed and 30 others was in jail, with everybody a wondering just what was afoot and just what charge again him can be got to Holt. God, if anybody'd look at the head. A couple of weeks later, when nothing had been thrown into the sea for that long. Zadok was showing signs of fright and exhaustion, and I let him keep silence for a while, though glancing apprehensively at my watch. The tide had turned, and was coming in now, and the sight of the waves seemed to arouse him. I was glad of that tide, for at high water the fishy smell might not be so bad. Again, I strained to catch his whispers. That awful night, I seed them. I was up in the cupola. Herds of 'em, swarms of 'em, all over the reef and swimming up the harbour to the exit. God, what happened in the streets of Innsmouth that night? They rattled our door, but Pa wouldn't open. Then he clomb out the kitchen window with his musket to find Selectman Mowry and see what he could do. Mounds of the dead and the dying, shots and screams, shouting an old tar squire and old town squire at New Church Green. Jail's road open. Proclamation. Treason. Called it the plague when folks come in and found half our people missing. Nobody left but them as a join in with Obed and them things, or else keep quiet. Never hear of my pa no more. The old man was panting and perspiring profusely. His grip on my shoulder tightened. Everything cleaned up in the morning, but these was traces. Obed, he kinder takes charge and says things is going to be changed. Others will worship with us at meeting time, and certain houses is got to entertain guests. They wanted to mix just like they done with the Kanakis, and he for one didn't feel bound to stop him. Far gone was Obed.
just like a crazy man on the subject. He says they belong as fish and treasure, and should have what they hinkered arter. Nothing was to be different on the outside, only we used to keep shy strangers if we knowed what was good for us. We all had to take the oath of Dagon. Later on, there was second and third oaths that some of us took. They must not help special, that get special rewards, gold and such. No use balking, and there was millions of them down there. They'd rather not start rising and wiping out humankind, but if they was gave away and forced to, they could do a lot towards just that. We didn't have them old charms to cut them off like the folks in the South Sea did, and them Kanakis wouldn't ever give away their secrets. Yield them enough sacrifices and savage knickknacks and harbourage in a time when they wanted it, and they'd let well enough alone. Wouldn't bother no strangers that might bear tales outside, that is, without they got prying. All in the band of the faithful, order a Dagon, and the children should never die, but go back to the Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, what we all come from want. Yeah, Cthulhu of Dagon, Fingli Mungafe, Cthulhu Relia, Wagnar for Dagon.
Old Zadok was fast lapsing into stark raving, and I held my breath. Poor old soul. To what pitiful depths of hallucination had his liquor, plus his hatred of the decay, alienage, and disease around him, brought that fertile, imaginative brain? He began to moan now, and tears were coursing down his channeled cheeks into the depths of his beard.
Dad, when I had seen since I was 15 years old, Minnie, tickle a parson. The folks as was missing, and them as killed theirselves. Them as told things in Arkham or Ipswich and such places was all called crazy, like you're a-calling me right now. But God, what I seen. They'd have killed me long ago for what I know. Only I took just the first and second oath of Dagon off an Obed, so was protected unless in a jury them proof I told things known and deliberate. But I wouldn't take the third oath. I'd have died rather than take that. It got worse around Civil War time, when children born Sect 46 began to grow up. Some of them, that is. I was afeard. Never did no prying after that awful night. I'd never seen one of them close to in all my life, that is. Never no full-blooded one. I went to the war, and if I'd had any guts or sense, I'd have never come back, but a little away from here. But folks wrote me things once so bad, that I suppose was because government draftman was in town under 63. After the war, it was just as bad again. Folks began to fall off, mills and shops shut down, shipping stopped and the harbour choked up, railroad give up. But they never stopped swimming in and out of the river from that cursed reef of Satan, and more attic windows got boarded up, and more noises was heard in houses as one supposed to have nobody in 'em. Folks outside have their stories about us. Suppose you've heard plenty on 'em, seeing what question you asked. Stories about things they've seen now and then, and about that queer jewellery that still comes in from some wars as ain't quite all melted up. But nothing ever gets definite. Nobody'll believe nothing. They call them gold-like things pirate loot, and allow the Innsmouth folks is foreign blood, or is them's tempered or something. Besides, them that live here show off as many strangers as they kin, and encourage the rest not to get very curious, especially around night time. Folks balk at the critters, hoose, hosses, wassen, mules, but when they got honours, that was all right. In 46, Captain Obed took a second wife that nobody in the town never see. Some says he didn't want to, was made to by them as he'd called in. Had 3 children by her. 2 as disappeared young, but one gal as looked like anybody else and was educated in Europe. Obed finally got her married off by a trick to an Arkham feller as didn't suspect nothing. But nobody outside will have nothing to do with Innsmouth folks now. Barnabas Marsh, that runs the Flying now, is Obed's grandson by his first wife. Son of Onesiphorus, his eldest son. But his mother was another as them as one never seen outdoors. Right now, Barnabas is about changed. Can't shut his eyes no more, and is all out of shape. He says still he wears clothes, but he'll take to the water soon. Maybe he's tried it already. They do sometimes go down for little spells before they go for good. Ain't been seen about in public for nigh on 10 year. Don't know how his poor wife can feel. She come from Ipswich, and they nigh lynched Barnabas when he quartered her 50-odd year ago. Obed, he died in 78, and all the next generation is gone now. The first children's dead, and the rest, God knows.
The sound of the incoming tide was now very insistent, and little by little it seemed to change the old man's mood from maudlin tearfulness to watchful fear. He would pause now and then to renew those nervous glances over his shoulder, or out toward the reef, and despite the wild absurdity of his tale, I could not help beginning to share his vague apprehensiveness. Zadok now grew shriller, and seemed to be trying to whip up his courage with louder speech.
Hey, you! Why don't you say something? How'd you like to be living in a town like this, with everything a rotting and a dying, and butted up monsters crawling and bleating and backing and hopping around black cellars and attics every way you turn? Hey, how'd you like to hear the howling light harder night from the churches in order a Dagon Hall and know what's doing part of the howling? How'd you like to hear what comes with an awful reef every May Eve and Hallowmas, hey? Think the old man's crazy, eh? Well, sir, let me tell you, that ain't the worst!
Zadok was really screaming now, and the mad frenzy of his voice disturbed me more than I care to own.
Curse you! Don't just sit there staring at me with my eyes! I tell no but mercy's in hell, and it's got to stay there! In hell, I says! Can't get me! I ain't done nothing nor told nobody nothing! Oh, you young feller! Well, even if I had told nobody nothing yet, I'm a-going to now! You just sit still and listen, me boy! This is what I ain't never told nobody. I says I didn't do no prying out on that night, but I found things out just the same. You want to know what the real horror is, hey? Well, it's this. It ain't what them fish devils has done, but what they're a-going to do. They're a-bringing things apart, out, or where they come out from in the town. Been doing it for years, and slacking it up lately. Them houses north of the river twixt Water and Main Streets is full of them. Them devils and what they brung, and when they get ready, I say when they get ready, ever he'll tell of a shoggoth. Hey, do you hear me? I know ye. I know what them things be. I seen 'em one night with... Yeah!
The hideous suddenness and inhuman frightfulness of the old man's shriek almost made me faint. His eyes, looking past me towards the malodorous sea, were possibly startling from his head, while his face was a mask of fear worthy of Greek tragedy. His bony claw dug monstrously into my shoulder, and he made no motion as I turned my head to look at whatever he had glimpsed. There was nothing that I could see, only the incoming tide, with perhaps one set of ripples more local than the long-flung line of breakers. But now Zadok was shaking me, and I turned back to watch the melting of that fear-frozen face into a chaos of twitching eyelids and mumbling gums. Presently, his voice came back, albeit as a trembling whisper.
Get out of here. Get out of here. They seen us. Get out for your life. Don't wait for nothing. They know now. Run for it. Quick. Out of this town.
Another heavy wave dashed against the loosening masonry of the bygone wharf, and changed the mad ancient whisper to another inhuman and blood-curdling spree.
Yeah! Yeah!
Before I could recover my scattered wits, he had relaxed his clutch on my shoulder and dashed wildly inland towards the street, reeling northward around the ruined warehouse wall. I glanced back at the sea, but there was nothing there, and when I reached Water Street and looked along it towards the north, there was no remaining trace of Zadok Allen.